Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe. Welcome to this Fleet Forum webinar. I see that people are joining, so I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to be settled in. And I see that my colleague Paul is also joining. Let me see. Paul, can you hear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you're in presenter mode, which is nice that you are joining me as.
I believe them.
Okie doke. So I see that there's a lot of people already using the webinar chat. That is also nice. So please use that to to introduce yourself, to tell us where you're from, which organization you are joining us from. But maybe also if someone can sort of let me know if my audio is loud and clear. So let me see. And then in the meantime, I will share my screen. And what I will do is I will activate a new gadget that we have, which allows you to read whatever I am saying in English, to read that in the language of your choice. So if you give me just a second to enable that, what you will see is you will get a pop-up in your screen that says, would you like to use Wordly? Wordly is the name of the gadget that we use, and that will allow you to read whatever I'm saying in the language of your choice. So let me set that up first. It's new technology that we're using, so allow me to make it work. Let me see. So you should have received the invite right now. So let me share my screen and then we can start. Okie doke. So what we're going to talk about today is about fleet profiling. And what I would like to do is in the next 30 minutes to give you an overview on the vehicles and the new terminology that we are using, but also take a little bit of a deep dive into emission standards and what do we mean when we talk about emission standards and why it is important for us as fleet managers to look at that or to look into that or to be able to talk the same language and to understand what people are talking about when we talk about these new vehicle technology and emission standards. And why do we feel that that is important? Well, maybe to remind ourselves, last year in October, during the Fleet Forum Summit, a huge number of our member organizations, and you might be working for one of them, they have signed commitments, and these commitments were voluntarily, so we will not hold anyone accountable if you don't get it. But what we did there is that we sort of looked at the ambition that we have as member organizations who are operating huge vehicles or fleet to reduce our impact on the environment. So one of these commitments, and you see all of three of them, was around, setting a baseline and targets for the emissions that are for the emissions of our fleets, but also that as a sort of more active indicator that we want to have within the next 5 years, that we want to have a quarter of our vehicles that they are Euro 3 emission standard or higher. And the last one is that within 3 years that our organization is participating in vehicle sharing initiatives in at least 20% of the operating countries. So maybe through your global fleet focal point or your global fleet manager or your logistics director, you might have heard already about these initiatives. And what we feel is that throughout the year that it is important that we discuss what that means, but also how you can make it happen. And this webinar is part of it, where we will talk about the difference between well, between internal combustion vehicles, but also electric vehicles, Euro emission standards, and explain a little bit of the terminology around it. Let me just quickly check. Okay, so that is what we're going to do. So another reminder for us is that we are using the avoid, shift, improve terminology. And so what that means, and maybe when you have participated in previous webinars already, what that means is that whenever we can, we want to avoid that we produce emissions. If we have done all the actions to avoid the production of emissions, then we want to shift to more environmentally friendly transport modes. And if we have done that, then we want to improve the energy efficiency of the transport modes that we use. And in this webinar, we will focus mostly on that sort of that green improvement area, because we are talking about the use of vehicles and the different types of vehicles. So today, more central is the improved part of our avoid, shift, improve methodology. Now, if you look, and I think this is important to, before we start to go into the more technical details, I think what is important, thank you, Farah. You see the presenter mode. Okay, let me swap displays. Is this better? Maybe? If you can sort of let me know. I will sort of continue. I hope, Farah, that you can let me know if it is better now. It's zoomed in on the slide. Okay, so I guess then that you are still seeing my notes. Okay, let me then change it. Let me just pause for a second. Stop sharing. Then let's see if this works better. Oh, this is, let's see. Okay, now how's this? I think this is better, right? We will, we are super. We are recording the session. We will sort of cut this all out. So going back to discuss, I would like to sort of discuss with you what the difference between the greenhouse gas or air pollutants, because when we talk about the need to reduce emissions, we often relate that to the need or the fact that we have, as organizations, we have to reduce our environmental impact, right? So when we talk about greenhouse gases, and what you see in the table here, when we talk about greenhouse gases is when we use our vehicles, we burn fossil fuels like petrol or diesel, and they produce greenhouse gases, and that is the CO2 that we are talking about. And these greenhouse gases, they contribute to the greenhouse gas effect or the greenhouse effect. And that is what, when we hear about in the news, is that our climate or the temperatures on the planet is rising. And that's not good, definitely not, but because, well, if the temperatures are rising, then the sea is rising, and the planet becomes less livable. Now, the other important thing, what we need to remember, is that our vehicles also emit a lot of air pollution. And that is during the combustion of fuels, but also because the wear and tear of our tires and our brakes. And there you see in the table, you see a lot of examples like NOx and particulate matter and carbon monoxide. And this is important to realize, these have a negative impact on human health. So these are the ones when you sometimes see pictures of a very foggy, smoggy, dark cities. And these give you health issues like respiratory health issues, or when you cannot breathe anymore. So it is important to distinguish between the greenhouse gas and the air pollutants. Now, maybe to stress that human impact a little bit more, if you look at research from WHO, they say that the air pollution, so that's not only air pollution from vehicles, but in total, the air pollution is associated with 6.7 million deaths, premature deaths per year. And that's a huge number, right? And also, if you look at the study that Fleet Forum did last year, together with KLU and Quart, where we looked at the environmental performance of both electric vehicles and traditional internal combustion vehicles, we see that the impact to human health is much higher. So the impact to human health is much higher than the impact on climate change. So climate change is important, yes, but the damage to human health is higher than what we see from climate change. And here you see, we tested a large number or a range of vehicles. And here you see that in the blue bar, that the large internal combustion vehicle, a diesel one, has the highest impact on our health. Now, thinking about, and this is also, I just wanted to show this picture. So, okay, what types of emissions do we get? So when we burn fuel, we get the CO2 that leads to climate change. And when we have our tailpipe emissions, then we also have CO2, but we have a lot of other stuff like particulate matter, NOx, when we are on the road. When we have the resuspension of road dust, we have particulate matter. When we have road surface, we have particulate matter. So it is important to know that there is a lot of emissions that are emitted by the vehicles that we use. Now, when you think about vehicles, we often talk about like the internal combustion engine, hybrid vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, battery vehicles. So I just wanted to briefly go through the different types. Now, I think everybody knows the ICE vehicle. That is the one that we are all familiar with. It is a conventional oil-derived vehicle, and it uses gasoline or diesel fuel. Now, the hybrid electric vehicle uses both an internal combustion engine, like in your traditional ICE vehicle, but also an electric motor to operate. So it can operate both on gasoline and electricity at the same time. Or not at the same time, but it sort of uses both technologies. Now, the plug-in hybrid vehicle, it is a type of hybrid electric vehicle, but it is equipped with an rechargeable battery pack. So that can be replenished by connecting it through a cable through the electric power source. So, and that is the difference between the normal, let's say the normal hybrid electric vehicle, because that still uses, that charges while it is using your internal combustion engine. Whereas you can charge the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle from an electric power source. Now, the other one is the battery electric vehicle that has no traditional internal combustion engine, but it has an electric motor. And then the last one, we won't go in too much detail into this one, but that is the fuel cell electric vehicle. And that is an electric vehicle that uses a fuel cell, sometimes in combination with a small battery, to power its onboard electric motor. And it uses generally oxygen from the air and compressed hydrogen. And when I did my research for this webinar, I read that most experts say that the fuel cell electric vehicle is the most environmentally friendly. It's the most clean because the only thing that it produces is water. So that is about the fuel cell electric vehicle. It's new technology. It's not out there fully on the market yet, but that is probably to come. So these are the sort of the types of vehicles that are there now. Now, let's look a little bit more into detail what the difference are. And like I said, the fuel cell vehicle, I will leave out. But if you look at the energy source and the consumption of the different vehicles, then what we see is that the internal combustion engine vehicle and the hybrid electric vehicle, both are using sort of the normal petrol or diesel for their energy. When we have the plug-in, like I said, there you can charge the battery already with a electricity charger, so electricity station, and the battery electric vehicle is only using the electricity source. So now if you look at the consumption then, and yeah, this makes sense, of course, is that the ICE vehicle uses petrol diesel, the hybrid and the plug-in hybrid are using both, and then the battery electric vehicle is using only the electricity that comes from the charging station. Now, maintenance also important. So when you look at the ICE vehicle or the hybrid electric vehicles or the plug-in hybrid, what you see, there's not a big difference between the maintenance schedule there. So all three types of vehicle, they have a high frequency of maintenance due to the number of moving parts in the motor. It needs fluid that we need to replenish, and we need to maintain the battery, but also the engine and the associated electronics. And in the little graph that you see there, which comes from a study where they looked at light-duty vehicles and the maintenance costs, what you see on the left is the ICE vehicle, and you see that the more we move to an electric vehicle, and the more that the maintenance costs are lower. And Fleet Forum is concluding a next phase of our electric vehicle project, and there we are also looking into the difference in maintenance costs, and we hope to share those results soon, because we start to get a better understanding of what that means for operating vehicles in Africa, and what that means if you operate a traditional vehicle and an electric vehicle, full electric vehicle, for example. So that is yet to come. But here in this graph, what you see is that, like I said, the more the more electric your vehicle becomes, the lower your maintenance frequency and costs are. Now, we already started to talk a little bit about the environmental impact, where I mentioned the greenhouse gases and the air pollutants. Now, what we can say in general is that when we talk about internal combustion engines, is that older vehicles have a negative impact on the environment, and that is also because they are consuming. Normally, older vehicles are consuming more fuel, and more fuel sort of creates more greenhouse gases. But if we look at let's say, the latest generation ICE vehicles, then they have a pretty good performance, and they only slightly perform under battery electric vehicles when it comes to tailpipe emissions. So, and remember, this is important. So we're talking about tailpipe emissions only. And the reason for that is because the motor technology and the motor efficiency is so much better that the performance is almost the same. And maybe you ask now, okay, what do you mean with latest generation? These are usually the vehicles that meet the latest emission standards. So it's not to say that if you say, oh, I'm going to buy a vehicle now, that automatically that is a latest generation ICE vehicle. You have to look at what type of emission standard does this vehicle meet. And I will talk about emission standards a little bit later. Now, hybrid vehicles, whether it is the normal hybrid or the plug-in hybrid, they reduce carbon emissions because you're not always using fuel, but you're using electricity for short distances. And of course, if you use electricity for short distances, then we can assume maybe that you're doing that when you drive in city environments. And of course, that has a huge impact on air pollution in city environments. So these are already better when it comes to environmental impact. Now, when it comes to full electric vehicles or battery electric vehicles, this is pretty tricky, maybe. So often they have a lower environmental impact, especially in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So, but what matters most is what resources are required to produce the vehicle and the type of energy used to power it. I think you might have been involved in discussions where it says, oh yeah, well, if we have to, let's say, charge the vehicle in an environment where we only have like very well, gray electricity, so coming from coal or non-renewable resources, yes, then of course your environmental impact is higher than it is if you can charge it from wind or solar energy. Now, the biggest impact it has is that an electric vehicle, a full electric vehicle, has no tailpipe emissions, and that the pollution comes only from parts like the tires and the brakes. And what is also important to realize is that if you invest in if you decide to use a battery electric vehicle, then you need to drive it between, let's say, 20 and 50,000 kilometers a year to compensate for the emissions from production. And that's data, and that conclusion also comes from the study that we did last year with KLU and Court. Now you might ask yourself, why is there such a big range between 20 and 50K? And that again has to do with the fact whether you charge it using very, very clean energy or where you charge it using, let's say, dirty energy or gray energy. So it's not always that you can see, oh, the full electric vehicle is the best. You really need to really need to look at, okay, how am I going to use it? Will I drive it enough? And will I meet that 20 to 50K kilometers to compensate? So that's then Euro standards. You might have heard about Euro standards, and the Euro standards are basically regulations that were introduced by the European Union a number of years ago, and they were the intention of the Euro standards was to improve air quality and to make cities more livable again, and to reduce air pollution and improve air quality from emissions from vehicles. So what they do, or what is important to understand, is that Euro standards have to do with regulation. So the Euro standards set limits on how much a vehicle can pollute. And what you see, and I have a slide about that, is that there is a gradual reduction. So if you compare let's say the first Euro 1 standard with the Euro 6 standard that we have now, then already we see that the Euro 6 is much stricter than the Euro 1, and sort of each standard has a phased approach. There's difference. The standards apply to different types of vehicles. So cars, trucks, buses, motorcycles, And what is important also to know is that using a Euro standard is that it makes that manufacturers must comply, or they must meet these emission limits. Well, of course, the standards, they help to mitigate the negative effect of air pollution. And what is also interesting to see is that the Euro standards do have a global influence. So they have influenced emission standards, emission regulations worldwide. What I said in the other slide, and here's what you see, is you see Euro 1, where it gave sort of standards for the nitrogen oxide, but carbon monoxide and the particulate matter limits that were there. So Euro 1, we were around 8. And now if you compare that all the way to the right to Euro 6, it is much stricter. And now there are also signs that Euro 7 will be introduced, and that will be even reducing more of the NOx and the carbon monoxide and the particulate matter. Emissions from tires and brakes will be included, but also when you look at how the limits will be set and will be tested, is that more diverse driving conditions will be considered. And it is expected that this will be that this will start from 2025 in Europe. Now, you might think like, okay, so how do I know what emission standard my vehicles have? I think we can safely say that currently in the majority of the vehicles that are driving around in the humanitarian sector, that they are Euro 0. If you look at sort of the markets where they are driving, my advice would be, in case of doubt, ask your supplier. My tip will be from now on to include emission standard specifications in your tender processes. And even though that currently the majority of the 4x4 vehicles are Euro 0, there are also, already manufacturers are introducing Euro 3 standard vehicles in the market, or that meet the Euro, but that are around the Euro 3, I should say, I should be precise, the Euro 3 standard, because the vehicles are not tested, but Toyota has announced that a Euro 3 standard-like vehicle will be available for the African market. But in case of doubt, ask your supplier, and please do include emission standard specifications in your tender processes, so that also we sort of push manufacturers to make them available. Now, what if you're not operating in Europe, or what if in your country they are using other standards? So there are different standards. What you see in this overview is the Euro standard and how that relates to other standards. So in the US, you have the US 2010. In Japan, you have the PNLTES. But also in India, you have the Bharat. China has their own standards, and you can sort of see how it compares to the Euro 5 and the Euro 6 standards. So that is sort of to give an overview of, okay, if you are operating in a market where they use different emission standards, then you can use this to say, okay, well, how does that relate then to the Euro? What is good, I think, and that goes back to what I was saying before, is that the introduction of the Euro standards have led to other governments to follow similar emission standards, or to implement similar emission standards. And what you see is that also countries are adopting the Euro standard as their standard. So, for example, Turkey, but also Australia and Russia, and there might be more countries that are using that. I see South Korea, so there's more. And I think that was it. I will stop sharing my screen, and I know that we have we had that little hiccup with my screen sharing. Let me see if we have questions. And I will quickly scroll through the. I see Carl is saying we are currently mapping our Euro emission standards for our global fleet. Are there any good sources to use instead of checking each supplier separately? Carl, if you're referring to the fact that some suppliers are using different standards, then I would sort of look at that comparisons slide that I just used, where different standards are compared against the Euro 5 and the Euro 6 standard. Let me know if that is what you were referring to. Let me see. I see Joseph. Thanks. What is the recycling plan for electric vehicle batteries? Cannot be polluting if batteries are not properly recycled. Are you aware that some people may use diesel generators to charge the batteries? Yes, so for the last comment, yes, I am aware of that. And like I said, that would not be something that we would recommend, because you sort of eliminated the positive effects. As for the recycling plan, that is I think you have to recycle the batteries in the proper way, in the best way. Similar to you have to dispose your vehicle in any case, you have to dispose your vehicle in the most sustainable way, right? So recycling plans for electric vehicle batteries, that needs to be looked into, and I agree that you have to do that in the best way possible. Let me see. I see that people are sharing some tips on the VIN decoder. So thanks, Sam. Okay, I'm not seeing more questions. I think, let me just quickly scroll. No, I don't see any more questions. So if there are no more questions, then I would like to thank you. I hope that you found this useful, and I hope to see you next time in our next webinar. Let us know what you think about the webinar. At the end of the webinar, you will be taken to a short, well, a one-question survey, and it will really, really help us if you could fill that in. And for now, I wish to, well, happy Valentine. Thank you. Happy Valentine to all of you. Have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.